military force which he used to expand his power on the rest of Britannia, including Scotland. And then, of course, Edward II, Edward III, and all the way down to Agincourt with Henry V, where the longbow was made uber famous. Well, I guess also at Crécy and Poitiers. So we have this. You won't be able to see it very well, but I've got a coin here. This is a coin of Edward III. So it's a medieval coin. You can see him if you want to look at it afterwards. He's got a pointy crown and kind of pointy ears, or maybe it's poofy hair. I can't tell myself. But we're going to be talking about where the founders got their ideas, as we have been for the last several weeks. And this is the last of my prepared classes. Father Tom will pick up where I leave off today next week with kind of doing a compare-contrast with some of the other cities around the world. But the first week we talked about Jerusalem and how the founders got ideas from Moses and Christ. Then we go a little to the west. We get to Athens. We talk about, who did we talk about? Solon and Pericles and Aristotle. So some really good stuff there. Then a little further to the west, we get to Rome, where we talked about Cicero and Augustus. And then today, we're going a little further north and west to London. And of course, all of these ideas, we're finding their comparison and where the founders put them together in Philadelphia. So today, we're going to be talking about London. And London, of course, has a lot of significance for Americans because that's England, English. That is where we get some of that. Our heritage here. It's our most, directly related cousin over the sea. And we're going to be talking about the ideas that they develop and pass down to us here on the other side. So we're going to be talking about rights of man. That's kind of the main theme. But to get there, let's start with rule of law. One of the things that the English really develop is this idea of rule of law and a constitution. Their constitution isn't written per se, but it is established, and it comes to us with this very strong idea, as Bracton says, that the king himself ought not to be under man, but under God and under the law, because law makes the king. And Bracton is one of the foundational scholars of English law. He kind of develops this idea, and he says that the king is under the law, not the other way around. It's kind of traditional for people to think of kings as being the high and mighty ruler who decrees things, and that whatever he says becomes the law of the land. And there is some level of that, right? That to be a ruler has some authority. But in the English system, there's law that makes the king. I don't know if any of you have read the Chronicles of Narnia, but C.S. Lewis actually has one of the most brilliant descriptions, and I wish I had it here. I need to add it into this class, of the king being under the law, because it's in The Horse and His Boy when Shasta finds out that he is going to inherit the kingdom. And he's talking to his father, who he never knew, as the king, and he's like, I don't want to, you have another son who can rule. And the king says, what you want isn't what matters. You are under the law just like everybody else. And we have laws that govern our society, and you, even as king, are under the law, for the law makes the king. Really brilliant. Russell Kirk says, the law, which is no respecter of persons, stands supreme. That is the essence of British legal theory and legal practice. So where do we get these ideas of the law being supreme? It comes from a famous document you see there called the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is foundational to American understanding of law, not just because of, or not because the particulars of what it says. It does have some interesting things in it. It establishes, for example, jury of peers. Do any of you know what the peers are, or what peers are? What do we mean by peers when we say a jury of our peers?
Like our neighbors.
Yeah.
Everyday citizens.
Yeah, ordinary citizens, people like us, right? That's what we mean when we say peers. And when our Constitution says jury of peers, that's what it's talking about. You know, back then, back at this time, that's not exactly what they were, what they meant. The peers of England was actually a class, and a jury of the peers. Oh, actually, let's tell a story. We have an arrow. Who's the most famous archer of all time? Robin Hood, exactly, Robin Hood. So the story of Robin Hood, we're familiar with, you know, the guy who goes after the king who's taxing too much, right? And brings justice to the land by supporting those poor citizens who are being overtaxed. So that's Robin Hood, right? Well, the villain of that story is Prince John, yes. So Prince John, that phony king of England, if you remember the old Disney animated movie where he's a fox, right? They have a song, Prince John, that phony king of England. Well, he was actually the king of England. Because at the time of Robin Hood, in the Robin Hood story, he's the prince, and he's the prince regent as Richard is off on crusade, right? But he becomes king. When Richard dies, he dies in battle in France, and John becomes king. And when John becomes king of England, he is known for being the king that taxes too much. He's constantly raising taxes. And at the time, it wasn't kind of like what we think of today, where we have income tax and sales tax and all that kind of stuff. It's more tax on land, tax for, you know, basically you're a noble, and so part of your life goes to the king. So the king wasn't necessarily directly taxing citizens. He was taxing the nobles, especially the top nobles of the land. So what he does, or what happens is he's constantly raising the taxes. The nobles are getting less and less happy with him, right? As we all do, and more of our money is being taken away. And taxes are not our favorite thing. Ask anybody on tax day, right? Which happened to be my birthday this year, because they moved everything due to the craziness of COVID and everything. But yeah, not the most popular day. So what ends up happening is the nobles all band together, especially the highest ranked nobles. They band together and they conduct a war, the Barons' War. And they go to war with the king. And of course, if you're very familiar with English history, you never actually go to war with the king. That's not done. You don't go to war with the king. That's inviolable. You can't go to war with the king. What you do is you go to war with the king's advisors. And you go and you defeat the king's advisors, and then you give him new advisors, who of course will advise him to not do these horrible things like raise taxes. So that's what they did. They go to war. They defeat the king's advisors in battle at what's the name of the battlefield? Is it I was just there. It's a really famous little battlefield, right near Windsor Castle, actually. So I can't remember off the top of my head. I should have it in my notes, but I don't. Runnymede, that's it. I do have it in my notes. At Runnymede. So that battle is on June 15, 1215. At the Battle of Runnymede. And they defeat the king's advisors, and the king is kind of frustrated. He doesn't know what to do. So they say, let's meet and talk about things. And they come to him, the peers of England, come to him with this document. It's called the Magna Carta. Does anybody know Latin, or enough Latin to know what the Magna Carta means? Magna is great, and Carta is charter. So the great charter, the great document. So they bring this great document to the king, and they say, Your Majesty, you need to agree to this. Please sign here. Except they didn't sign back then. So please seal here. So he affixes the royal seal to the document, agreeing to give them several rights and privileges. One is that he won't tax them too much. Another one, because this is a pretty big deal, you've just gone to war, right? Not with the king, but with the king. And so you don't want to have any sort of repercussions. And so they say that these peers should have the right to a trial of the peers, not the king. So if there's any crime that they are said to have committed, they don't want the king to be the one ruling on that case. What they want is they want the peers to rule on that case. Yes, they're afraid of the vengeance of the king. And so they take that power of the king and they say, Your Majesty, you're agreeing to not do that, right? And the way we're going to assure that is by having a jury of the peers. So that's how we get jury of peers, and that's where the word peers comes from, even though we use it completely different, because we talk about it in terms of peer pressure and all that kind of stuff, our equals. And they were talking about their equals, but they weren't talking about average, ordinary citizens.
They weren't a literate society.
Correct.
It's a peasant society, so peers weren't knowledgeable people.
Yeah, and even the nobles, many of them weren't educated, and it was often like if you were a king or a high-ranking noble, you didn't write your own letters. You had a scribe who knew how to read and write, and they would be responsible for taking care of that stuff. You couldn't read your own letters. Oftentimes, some could, and it really varied by family and all that kind of stuff. But it was definitely not expected that even the peers would be educated in that way. It's very interesting. So the Magna Carta is not, so I mention it and I say it's one of the most important documents influencing the ideas that found our nation, but it's not because of the jury of the peers part, although that is important. It's not actually because of any specific element or any specific piece of the content. Rather, what becomes the huge precedent that cascades down to us through the centuries is the fact that the law is over the king. Now we have the Magna Carta, this great charter that says in black and white, or maybe a dark reddish hue and white, that the king is bound by the law. And that becomes tremendously important, especially as the founders are looking at, we'll come back to that, but when the founders are looking at the situation that they're in, they're not saying, oh, well, the king said it, we have to do it. They're saying, here's what the law says, and here's what the king's doing, and they're not lining up. They're not lining up. And it comes from this pivotal moment in history on June 15th, 1215. Crucial story. And of course, it's got Robin Hood in it, right? So, I mean, Robin Hood's just kind of the setup for the rest of the story, but still, it's Robin Hood, who's awesome. All right. So this is crucial. This is crucial. All right, let's fast forward a little bit. So that was 1215. In 1295, so a few decades later, a couple generations maybe, we get this new idea. So in 1295, we get this idea of representative government. And it comes from shall we call it an experiment, called the Model Parliament. The Model Parliament. So I mentioned the English longbow being taken up by Edward I, as he kind of begins to unify the island and create what becomes the United Kingdom eventually, uniting England and Wales and starting to go after Scotland and all that kind of stuff. Well, Edward I, his name is Edward, obviously, but he goes by Longshanks because he has long legs. So Longshanks, I don't know. It's how it goes. So they call him Longshanks. He's tall. That's Edward the Tall. Edward I, the Tall. And Edward I, Longshanks, is known as a warrior. He's known as the warrior king. If you've seen Braveheart, the film there, the angry king who's like, yelling all the time, that's Edward Longshanks, Edward the First. And he is known for his battle prowess and for conquering. But the problem for Edward is that wars are expensive. Follow the money, right? Money's always in there somewhere. Taxes, expensive wars. It seems to come down to this so many times. What ends up happening is he's trying to fight these wars, and he's got these peers, the nobles of the realm, who are not 100% behind all these taxes that they're paying. And he doesn't want to fall into the same problem that happened with John, who is now, by this point, infamous. Nobody wants to be that king. You'll notice there's no John II in English history. There's no John III or John V or John VIII. No. They had one John and no more. Nobody wants to be called John. King John, nope, that one didn't end so well, right? So he's thinking of that. He's thinking, I don't know, was that his great-great-grandfather or something? I don't know. But he's I'd have to think a bit to try to remember how it all connects. But he's thinking, I don't want to be John the second, even though my name is Edward, right? So he's thinking, no, can't have this same problem, but I want this tax money because I want to fight all my wars. I'm winning these wars and I need to win more, right? That's what he's thinking. And so, but he doesn't want to be John. So what he decides to do is come up with something clever. And he sends out something called a writ. He sends out a writ. And this is the writ, what the writ said. I don't know Latin. Quad animus tangent ab animum blah, 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 blah. Whatever that is. None of you speak Latin, right? So, what? You don't speak a dead language? What's with this society these days? Well, I don't either, so I guess we're all on the same page. But I do have a translation in my notes. And my translation, the translation of this famous writ is, what concerns all should be approved by all. What concerns all should be approved by all. So he's basically buttering them up, right? He's like, okay, I need to get their taxes. I need to raise their taxes a bit, but I can't just tell them, give me your money. That sounds like highway robbery. Instead, what he wants to do is call a meeting. And he says, what concerns us all should be approved by all. So he gathers all these nobles together in this model parliament, and he makes his pitch. He makes the case. We need to win all these wars. It's good for our country. It's good for our economy. It'll make us all better off, all this kind of stuff, but it costs some money. You need some investment. I need some help. Can you help with that? And so he puts the argument together, and he makes the case, and they go for it. They say, sure, we'll help with that. But in that moment, unintentional as it may be, we get this parliament, this gathering where these people come together to decide on what concerns all should be decided by all. And then these nobles agree to be taxed. And from that point on, the kings of England are always struggling to get taxes because because the nobles have now got that power. They've got the power of the purse. They know that the king should ask them. The king should ask them, and they should agree. And if there's a way that they can come to an agreement, that's how it should work.
How many people were in this?
That's a good question. I don't have that on with me. I think it was like 100 and some, maybe 200. It was a sizable gathering, but not like every squire in the realm type thing. But that's a good question. I should find that out. Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't like just the small like privy council type, like just the few magnates. Yeah.
It's basically, it's like you have a lot of wealthy farms.
Mm-hmm.
They were the wealthy farmers.
Yep.
They owned land and
Sure.
they owned the crops and stuff. In Braveheart, there's the Scots wanting to rule their own,
Mm-hmm.
and they had their nobles who were subject to the crown
Mm-hmm.
and cooperating and not cooperating, vacillating back and forth and stuff.
Exactly.
That's where William used his leverage.
Yeah. So I think maybe to help, I can't give you a number, but maybe to help give you an idea. So every landowner had some status, right? And there were layers. So the king, do you have a number?
For Wikipedia, it was 49 words and 295, or sorry, 292 other representatives.
Cool. Yeah, so about 300. So what it would be is the king's family is like the crown, and then under them are like the few great magnates, right? So we're talking like a dozen maybe, and then under them are going to be kind of the second tier, and then the third tier, fourth tier, etc. So it would have been the top like probably 2 or 3 tiers of the realm. But the key thing is the power of the purse is now been established. There's this agreement that a body outside of the king gets to raise taxes. And we can come back to that in a minute, because we have that in our Constitution as well. All right, so let's see. Any questions about the model parliament? No? Let's jump to... I think I need to rearrange the order here. Let's see. Actually, no. Let's go straight to it. Philadelphia. What did the founders get from these 2 concepts? Anything jump out at you?
A strong law or document,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a group of people that make sure the king, or whatever we call him, follows the rules.
Yeah. Yeah, so the first part, the rule of law thing, the king being under the law, we took the idea of a Magna Carta and then we put it into the framework of government. It's called our Constitution. And then we put the Bill of Rights on there too, which we'll get to in a second. And what we do is we write it all down and we say, Mr. President, Congress, Supreme Court, everybody in government, you're under this. This applies to you as much as everybody else. Our Constitution has, if anything's the king in the United States, it's the Constitution. It's from which all the power flows.
No, my mind's reeling with the executive order and
Yes.
benevolent dictatorship. Terms like
Does it always work? No. But it's the design
no.
as crafted in.
It still works. It's not law.
Yeah, that's true. There are actual limits. There are actual limits. And then when it comes to the power of the purse, one thing that a lot of Americans don't know is in our Constitution, the power of the purse, the power to raise taxes, is the most restricted thing. One of the most restricted things. It is, the president can't do it, the Supreme Court can't do it, Congress can't do it, or I guess it can, but it has has to start in the House of Representatives. So the Senate can't do it without it starting in the House. And if you know about how Congress is set up, which I'm sure you do, there's the Senate, which is smaller. It's 100 people, 2 per state, and the House of Representatives, which is 435 voting members. And the concept behind that the founders really wanted to establish is the Senate is the voice of the states, and it's the voice of steadiness. It's a smaller body, more deliberative, supposedly, and less rules on their functioning. That's how you get the filibuster and things like that. And longer term, so more stable. Somebody goes in, they serve for 6 years, which is longer than the president, and they can be reelected. And it's supposed to be slow, and you only elect 1/3 at a time. We're in a slightly larger cycle this year, 2020. because of some retirements and just the way the math comes out. The House was supposed to be the people's house. It is fast turnover. You only have a 2-year term. So it's constant re-election. They're always afraid that they're going to lose their seat. And they are, and unlike the senators, which are chosen by state, and therefore, designed to be on the stable side, the House is small groups that represent your community. So it's just Northern Virginia. It's just Richmond area. It's just that community, right? And so it's a smaller body, or they represent a smaller body of the population. And it's a larger body because of that, it just means that there's many of them representing lots of little districts. Of course, there are some very large districts like Alaska, because the state got such a small population that the whole state is their district. But it's still a smaller population than most senators. So we get the power of the purse, we get rule of law, constitution, holding even the elected people accountable. So another thing that we have is the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights. I don't know if you can see very well on this screen, but we have the Bill of Rights here, and I've underlined a few key things. The First Amendment in the Bill of Rights is packed full of stuff. It's got, establishment, no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise of religion, or abridging freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people to assemble and to petition to the government and redress of grievances. Those are some pretty big deals. We like those. The First Amendment is packed full of content that we really like, right? Freedom. Next, we have the Second Amendment. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Then we have the Third Amendment. So the First and Second Amendment, those get a lot of airtime. They get a lot of press. I feel like the Third Amendment is really lonely because nobody pays any attention to the Third Amendment. I mean, when was the last time you had somebody plead the Third? Or you heard somebody talk about their Third Amendment rights being infringed. And it's, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house. And so, that was a problem. In Boston, right before the Revolutionary War, the British soldiers came in and just kind of moved into people's houses, and they didn't have much choice in the matter. So it was a problem, but this one doesn't get a lot of airtime. But I feel like it should. I feel like people should appreciate the Third Amendment more, because it's kind of the forgotten amendment. It's the orphan.
Home is your castle.
Yes. We've definitely embraced the principle of it, even if we don't see it being violated very much. Then we have the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, and so it's privacy, papers, effects, unreasonable searches and seizures. So that's a pretty important one. Let's see. The Fifth Amendment, nobody shall be held for capital or otherwise infamous crime unless they are indicted by a grand jury. And there's no double jeopardy, and they shall not be compelled in any criminal case to witness against themselves. So this is when they plead the Fifth, right? And they say, I'm not gonna say anything that might incriminate myself. So that's the Fifth Amendment. Then we got the Sixth, which is dealing with criminal prosecutions, and the key part of it's the impartial jury. That one's pretty important. And we have the Seventh Amendment, suits in common law. If they exceed $20, then you shall have a right of a jury. So it's a little more bolstering that jury thing, which goes back to the Magna Carta, right? We've got the Magna Carta with the importance of a jury that's not going to be hitting you for difference of political opinion or anything like that. Then we have excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments nor cruel and unusual punishment shall be inflicted. So we're protecting people's right to be safe. And then the last two are kind of the catch-all amendments that are basically saying, if there's anything else that we didn't mention, the people have those rights too. So which is handy. Not very useful. You can't like say, well, this is a right that I have, and expect it to really hold much water. But it reminds us, the people, because remember the Constitution starts with "we the people," that there are rights that we indeed have. But my question is, with these unalienable rights, where did these specific ideas come from? Let me tell you a story. See these two people here? They're not both guys, and they're also not both girls, despite what my students think, because they always think that the king there is a girl because he has the long hair. It's not true. He's wearing armor. He's the king. And then next to him is his queen. So these are very interesting individuals in history because they are the only king and queen to co-rule in English history. So typically what happens is you have the king, who is the ruler of the nation, and he's married to his queen, who's the consort. And so she's called the queen, but she doesn't co-rule with him. She's she's the wife of the king, but she doesn't have like ruling authority. Or you have what we have today, where Queen Elizabeth is the queen, and she has her prince consort, who it doesn't rule. He's the husband of the queen, right? So Queen Elizabeth is the queen, and her husband is just the consort, king consort, prince consort. These two are king and queen together. They are co-rulers of England. How did this happen? How did this happen? It's a fascinating, fascinating story. I am going to beg your indulgence because when I teach this class to high schoolers, I teach them this segment through something that I feel like could connect to them a little bit. So please forgive me if I'm connecting to the more ridiculous side of your nature as opposed to the more serious side of your nature. But we're going to go to 1689. 1689 in England. And there's a problem. There's a problem in England. We have this king. He is not a very popular king. He's King James. And King James has a problem because England is at this point a Protestant nation. And the head of the Church of England, which is a Protestant church, is the King of England. Protestant nation, Protestant church, and the head of that church is the king. Well, unfortunately for the people of the time, King James is Catholic. And you have a Catholic king over a Protestant nation and a Catholic head of a Protestant church. This is getting uncomfortable in so many ways. And he's not strong, he's not liked, and everybody is like, please, we don't want to listen to this man. Go away, go away. But he doesn't go away because he's the king, and you don't really have an option to just like, bye. So they're getting more and more frustrated, and they gather kind of the parliamentary leaders, the magnates, these powerful people, and they're all getting together, and they're really frustrated. So they pull out their equivalent of the 1689 iPhone. They pull it out, and they're talking, and they're like, oh, the king, he's such an idiot. He's so frustrating to work with. We don't like him at all. Do we have any other options? And they're like, who would we ask? Who could be king? I don't know. You can't be king. You don't have any royal blood in you. You don't have, none of us. What do we got? So they pull out their iPhone, and they start scrolling. And they're going through their contacts list, and they're like, so who do we got? Who do we got? Oh, there's John. John's like a cousin. Oh, but we don't want a John. That didn't go well last time. Keep scrolling through the contacts list. Go, go, go. Let's see. John, no, let's see. Oh, here's another person, Edward. Has anybody heard from Edward recently? I think he's too distantly related. I don't think we can make that work. Okay, let's keep going. And they keep scrolling through their list, and they're like, Henry, and do we want another Henry VIII? That one was kind of a little rough. Too many wives, really confusing. Who's the queen today? I don't know. It gets complicated. And then they stop, and they're like, wait. Has anybody heard from Mary recently? Mary? You mean the king's daughter? Yeah. What's she doing? I don't know. Let me text her. So they send the 1689 version of a text, and they're like, "Hey Mary, how's it going?" ? Smiley face. Send. And Mary's like, notification. Parliament? Why is Parliament texting me today? Hey, I'm doing all right. What's up? ? She answered. Oh, no big deal, nothing big, just kind of curious. I mean, what are you doing these days? ? I am Queen of Holland. They didn't call it Holland back then, but the Dutch. I'm Queen of Holland. I got married. Have you all met William? He's super cool. Exclamation point, smiley face, heart. William, ruling? ? Is he good at that? ? Send. Yeah, he's pretty popular. He's, Protestant and, keeps the taxes relatively low, and he's brave and true. Everybody likes him. Smiley face, winky face, send. Popular? ? Low taxes? ? Good in battle? Exclamation point, backspace, ? Send. Yeah, he's good at all those things. We're just kind of doing our thing, ruling here in Holland. Smiley face. So, are you busy on Friday? ? Friday? Hey, William, are we busy on Friday? I mean, we've got kind of this ruling Holland thing going on, but otherwise, not too much. I mean, we're kind of busy ruling Holland. Send. So, what do you think of coming and, visiting and ruling England for a little while? Smiley face. Send. Wait, what? Husband. William, what do you think of going and ruling England for a little while? He's like, well, it's bigger than Holland, and but I've got a lot of responsibilities here, and I guess I'd have to give it to my brother or cousin or something. I don't know. And they start chatting, and then they're like, well, I mean, we are available on Friday, so they say, sure, maybe. What are you thinking? And at this point, Parliament's like, hey guys, they are available, and they're Protestant, and keeping taxes low, brave, popular. This seems like a win. Let's do it. And they're like, oh, wait. If we're going to ask them to come and rule over us, we need to do something. What are you thinking? I think we need some terms and conditions. You know how when you get an iPhone and you like load an app or you get an update and everything, it's always asking you to approve terms and conditions? Nobody ever reads those. Let's send them some terms and conditions. That way everything will be fine. We'll be good. Okay, what do you want to put in these terms and conditions? Oh, I don't know. Let's put our brains together. So they start putting together these terms and conditions. They come up with these ideas. They start writing them all down, and then they send them over to William and Mary. And they're like, rule England? Sure. Oh, terms and conditions, accept. They're not even paying close attention. They just, I mean, who does? Who does? Everybody just says accept. No, we'll sue them later if we're confused, right? That's the mindset. So they accept, and then William and Mary come to visit. They come over on Friday night, and they get to England. Whoa. That's kind of weird. Okay, so they get to England, and they land, and they begin to go from place to place. And it's called the Glorious Revolution because nobody dies. It's a revolution where nobody dies. They land, and there's a big party, and Parliament meets them, and they go to the next place, and the generals meet them, and they go to the next place, and the people meet them, and wherever they go, it's just a big party. And the problem with this whole picture is that James is still king in his mind, right? So he's sitting off in his castle, and he's like, hey, guys, I'm still king. Guys, hey, I'm still king. Hey, guys. He's the annoying person at every party, you know. Guys, you need to pay attention to me. And, of course, they don't. They're literally just partying across the realm, and they get to London, and they have their coronation. Finally, James just packs up, and he's like, I'm going to go to my friend's house, and he goes to France. And, you know, he just lives the rest of his life in France. But William and Mary, you know, so William and Mary, we have a college in Virginia here called William and Mary, right? They've had a huge, huge impact on society. They rule very popularly, the only co-rulers in English history. But they give us something that's key. It's those terms and conditions. And if you look closely at the terms and conditions here, it's written a little different, and it's written more archaically than we're used to. But you can see I've underlined a few key points. One of them is, with the terms and conditions, is the former king. So what they're doing is they're complaining about the former king, James, and they're saying, don't do these things. That's how this document is written. So you see down there, the first underline says, and guess what? He quartered soldiers contrary to law in our houses. We don't like that, so you don't do that. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. Then we have the next one, causing several good subjects, being Protestant, to be disarmed at the same time when the papists are both armed and employed contrary to law. So what they're saying is the Catholics had a right to bear arms, but the Protestants didn't, and that's not fair. So don't do that. Give us all the right to bear arms, right? So let's go to the next next set. Here we go. In the late years, there's been partial and unqualified persons that have been returned to serve on juries and trials. They want fair trials, fair juries established throughout the realm. They complain about excessive bail. We've heard this before. And then this one, I like this one. Illegal and cruel punishments. They've been inflicted upon us. I mean, we changed it around a little bit to cruel and unusual, but illegal and cruel, we get the idea. And then the last one, several grants and promises made of fines and forfeitures before any conviction. So they're talking about those excessive fines, excessive bails. And so we begin to see that the founders are taking their ideas very blatantly in some cases from other sources like the English Bill of Rights. And we get it because of terms and conditions accepted via text conversation. So, any questions about this? Any questions about England and the founders, where we get these ideas all kind of coming together in Philadelphia?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Well, let me end with what now? One of the things that I think is really important for us to remember is that the things that come down to us through the centuries, whether they're coming from Jerusalem through the teachings of Christ and the law of Moses, or it's coming to us from the Greeks with democracy and equality before the law, or the Romans with this idea of universal law that applies everywhere, or the English that have these institutions that are established to protect rights and to put the law over the rulers, not the other way around. Whatever the case is, what we see is that in our time, these rights are passed down from generation to generation. They come to us from the ancient past through Philadelphia to us today. And the question is are we willing to carry on that teaching, to carry on those principles, to apply them to our lives? And every generation is responsible for taking the lead on those things. When things begin to crumble, when things look dark, when things are difficult, somebody's got to stand up. And the question is will we? And I know Abraham Lincoln isn't the most popular president, but some of the most important words ever spoken in context of government come from the Gettysburg Address. And in the Gettysburg Address, he's not just, of course, he's talking to his time, but his words echo to us because there is universal truth there. Because what he's calling for is he's calling for each generation to stand up and to be a part of that heritage of carrying the principles that have come down to us to the next generation and to apply them in our lives and in the lives of those around us. This is where we get the idea of the people, by the people, for the people, not perishing from the earth. So I like to end this session by reading Abraham Lincoln's speech, where we can take that in and think about how we can apply the principles that we've talked about for the last several weeks to our time today. And Abraham Lincoln said, 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what they say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they have fought here, who have fought here, have thus far notably advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that the dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. That is our charge. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you all, and I've really enjoyed this class. I look forward to next week, where we hear from Father Tom and as he starts talking about the contrasts here. But thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Thank you. Very good.